Thanks for coming out today. Today we have the great privilege of having Peter Exley here with us. He's an architect and advocate for interactive public environments and is committed to construction of new paradigms in pedagogy, play, public space, and participatory experience. He's originally from Caribbean, England, if I said that correctly. And he received his Bachelor's of Arts in Architectural Studies from Newcastle University in England. That's correct. And his Master's of Architecture from UPenn. Prior to finding his own firm in 1994, which is called Architecture is Fun here in Chicago, you should definitely check it out. He worked for Skidmore, Owings & Merrill in Chicago and in London, and then for Venturi, Scott Brown and Associates in Philadelphia. He was also the 2013 a Chicago president, and he is currently a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. So pretty great achievements there. So without further ado, let's welcome Peter Exley.
Gabriel asked me if I was hiring, and I said I'm only hiring people that are sat on the third row or further forward. Okay, so just an FYI. So thanks for having me. I've got a shameless promotion, I think, to begin with. PechaKucha next Tuesday at Martyrs. If you've got nothing to do on Wednesday, you should spend your Tuesday evening up at Martyrs. So Power Play, I think I'm supposed to talk a little bit about open source, or I see that on the poster upstairs. So here's the greatest open source thing, drawing, we can all do it, and Lego. What an amazing sort of toy that we've all connected with, something that was maybe a portal into design. This is a drawing I did of a Mies before I made that, and it sort of seemed appropriate to do that. It looks like him, right? A little bit. You guys are not an interactive audience. So I like to draw, and sometimes when I've forgotten my sketchbook or it's a little too nerdy to get your sketchbook out, I draw on this thing. It's not a very good drawing tool, I don't think. But you can do these on buses and set around in places where you don't have to talk to somebody about what's in your sketchbook. Here's one of my feet. If you read David Hockney, he delights in creating digital images, and he's been doing that for a long time. He actually claims that he can get a higher resolution using certain softwares and input devices digitally than he actually can by painting. So it's a really amazing concept. This is a really sort of crappy, uncontrolled 320 by 480 pixels. So I had the good fortune to go to Rio de Janeiro for a project, and my favorite thing is to drink from the coconut in the morning. That would be my breakfast on the beach in Ipanema. This is some pictures of me drawing in Ipanema. There's a little bit of, they're not very good, right? Not in agreement. You don't have much control over this thing and the phone. And with the software that I'm using, you actually can get a much better image by drawing lines in the sand. This is a really fabulous sketch created by a guy on the track with a tractor every morning on the beach in Leblon. And right next to these fabulous sidewalks that are in Rio, designed by Robert Burley Marx. That actually, if you need one reason to go, it's just to walk along these. When you're in a restaurant, you don't want to be getting your sketchbook out. It definitely irritates my family when I do that. It slows the meal down, but it always seems to be okay to get your phone out in a restaurant these days. So sometimes I make little drawings of sushi. They're not getting any better because I'm drinking beer. Here I'm on the beach then, so drinking cocoa. You can actually get the same thing at Whole Foods in 1 litre cartons, imported from Brazil for $8. And I'm thinking when I'm in Rio, these gestures, like I'm making on my phone, or the guy is making every morning in the sand with his tractor, they're everywhere. And they're part of a design vocabulary. And a lot of the form and the design that you see in Rio is actually inspired and complemented by the natural landscape. You see the gestures everywhere, and it's a really simple language, and it's embraced in even the most mundane places, like on this taxi cab door. And obviously by artists. This is a sketch by by Oscar Niemeyer, who translates this image of a flower, which I don't think he drew on an iPhone, into this really lovely, simple and amazing building. Here's a quote by Oscar Niemeyer. "It's not the right angle that attracts me, nor the straight line, hard and inflexible, created by man. What attracts me is the free and sensuous curve, the curve that I find in the mountains of my country, in the sinuous course of its rivers, and in the body of the beloved women." So one of the great things about the coconut is splitting it open once you've drunk the milk inside, and there's always a really lovely surprise inside. Like the inside of that Oscar Niemeyer building, and here the strong gestural lines of the mullions frame the views, and the middle ground is that sensuous meandering line that's traced by the people that walk up it. This is really fantastic. So check out these same lines on the red trash can, or in the sidewalk, or even on the mountain behind. It's that same sinuous gesture. It's really, really beautiful. Oscar Niemeyer does these same sketches that are almost as good as my iPhone sketches, and he translates them into these ceramic line of people that are queuing up in front of his theatre in Niterói. He says, not form follows function, but form follows beauty, or even better, form follows feminine. I don't see anybody in the audience with their iPhone drawing here. You're on a break from that. So these drawings of Niemeyer's are great. I can't resist putting them in my own sketchbook. This is a lot slower though, and sometimes it's a little more pleasing to do it. It's definitely more permanent, and for me this is a better way to make a memory. Consider the beauty of this Roberto Burle Marx pattern. It's consistent, it's beautiful, there's like 20 dots in there. It's really fabulous to walk on, or to stand around. It creates an environment that empowers and is full of identity. You know, if you're brave enough to walk around like this, and plenty of people are in Rio, everybody looks at each other, or not, on this cool quilt of pattern. And it creates a place where you can learn to socialize. Even the trees try to creep out of their planters and stroll on this hard landscape. Cocoa is the commerce, 2.5 real there. And it's where you and I and our pets, where we take a stroll. And it's where you and I and we all hang out. This is a really great community made in the landscape. It's not on Facebook, this is really face to face. Even at the night time, it's a special place. Although the cocoa are actually, I love this photograph. I don't know what they were doing, but they were walking home, these cocoa. Nobody had bought them. So this is a sort of short tale about how simple things like drawing lines and taking time to look at the simplest things around you, referencing your own landscapes and cultures and customs brings us all together. And this is a really sort of happy and worthwhile thing. Looking and seeing and understanding and creativity help create beautiful and relevant places for people to be themselves. This is our job as architects and as designers. So here are 50 little drawings of things that are important to me. They're arranged randomly in a glorious conversation, and that highlighted appropriately, they reveal that beautiful pattern, of Roberto Burle Marx. This is conveniently a wall covering or textile that we use in our projects. Here's Mies again. Does look like it, doesn't it? No? So, what's this got to do with my practice? What's the power of play? How does all this sort of come together? Well, Taylor said that we founded our practice in 1994, April Fool's Day. So we're almost 21. We're almost old enough to drink. And instead of starting our practice with the kitchen addition for a relative, we actually started by, we were very fortunate, designing buildings in communities for children. We didn't really sort of plan it that way. We were volunteering and hanging out with people that were providing interesting things for our daughter. And one of those places was Chicago Children's Museum. So we ended up on a trajectory that brought us into contact with a lot of museums and places that created informal places for learning. So we're really committed over 20 years, or we have committed to play, participatory process, and doing interesting things in the public realm. Generally, public space and having fun, is the sort of credo of our practice. And so in the first 3 years of the practice, we found ourselves really conscious of the value we were bringing to communities, and we were really committed to doing it in a joyous and empirical fashion. This children's museum, I think, is joyous. It's in Kankakee. You sort of have to fight for these things often and validate them. One of the ways in which we pitched and sold this is that here's a $1 million building bought by a community, but it actually brought $1 million and has continued to bring $1 million back to that community in tourism every year. So that building really sort of starts to pay for itself straight away, and in a town of 30,000 people, that's really impactful. This is a prototypical children's museum that cost $400,000 to build. But they only actually used $30,000 cash for it. And a generous and giving community, as a generous and anxious community, they were really interested to see if a children's museum could thrive in their community. And so they tested the waters with this prototype, and they leveraged the design and the execution of it with in-kind donations. And a 30-year-old young architect got really motivated to work in Columbus, Indiana, and to make sure that what they were doing didn't look like crap. So this was sort of the infancy of our practice. Project yourself into this position. This is where you should be in like 3, 4, 5 years. This is possible. So here are some grubby and fun-loving English children in the black and white world that I grew up in. There's this notion that play and fun are exclusive to childhood. But you are really closely connected to your childhoods. Play is really, really serious business. This is the way that you explore, and we should not dismiss that or forget about that. It's not merely something that consumes the first 2 years of your childhood or of your lives and our existences. As you graduate, don't forget about this. The very first movie I saw was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. This is really memorable, and you will not relate to this at all. But up until this point, in 1968, I had never ever seen a color moving image before. Who's seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? It's a brilliant story, right? Everything revolving around children. Even though it's in England, it's sunny. Everybody is free to do mischievous and sometimes scary things. And everyone gets to play outside in this endless British summer. Like all kids, I was formed by things around me. For me, this was the great county of Yorkshire, which is the Texas of England. It's the biggest and it's the best, and we don't mind telling you about it. My black and white world was coloured by famous Yorkshire people. Before my mum met my dad, she actually went out with David Hockney's brother. This was conversation around our dinner table. I'm not sure why, but I think my mum's motivation for telling us about this connectivity was to support and her ambition that we valued art and creativity in our family. I lived near Haworth, which was where Charlotte, Emily and Anne Bronte had grown up. And I loved going to their home, which had been converted into a museum. The Brontes made little books and wrote stories as children with the limited materials that they had at their disposal. And I imitated that. My grandfather had travelled the world as a wool cloth salesman, and I loved hearing him telling stories about this fantastic place called America. Even though it wasn't in Yorkshire, it actually seemed as though it might be as good as Yorkshire, especially when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I loved Kojak. Does anyone watch Kojak? Kojak, great YouTube fodder for you. Granddad once bought an American business colleague to meet us from America, and he gave me a $2 bill, which I still have. It's in my sock drawer. When I was about 10, I used to read a comic book called The Beezer, and one of the strips featured little people that live inside of your head. You know about these, right? There's little people inside your head. You've got them. I know you do. And in the caverns of your hollow noggin, mechanically and with really crude computers, they controlled every bit of your body. How cool is that? Every child loves animals in the landscape, real or otherwise. This crocodile has had a meal of real live children. Some of them are still alive in its belly, in the process of being rescued by other kids. These were Nicky de St. Phail sculptures that were planted in Garfield Park a few summers back. Being artful with our landscapes and environment shouldn't be an exception. This is your job. Watching this family run around was very uplifting. If you've ever been in a family, these are the kinds of things that you really cherish. And I think this is probably exactly what every designer and architect wants to create, places like this that make memories. This is why, as architects, everybody in this room, we're critical of making things like this happen. This is the power of play. And if you aren't making them, then you should be expecting them and demanding them. Nothing is more important than advocacy for inventive, creative places and spaces, not just for children, but for us all. In our practice, we're into giving kids real stuff. This happens to be in a museum, but unlike in sort of real museums or schools, places perhaps of formal learning, where sometimes discipline and test-taking seem the norm, it's really important to us to make this stuff accessible. This is a tunnel with a really big-ass fan in it. It's so windy in there, even I, at 160 pounds, have ridden a trolley in there, propelled by a pillowcase. Kids really like big-ass fans. The tunnel is in the window of the DuPage Children's Museum, right next to the street, and children aren't allowed to play in the street anymore. This is our attempt and endeavour to let you play in the street, to be mischievous and naughty. Parents really don't like playing in the street with kids. Parents actually only really like kids to play when they're supervised. This is not a good notion, a good place to be. When I was a kid, one of my favourite things to do, I grew up on a farm, was to throw rocks into cow pies. Who's done that? The really crusty ones. They're only crusty for a few millimeters, and then they're really spectacularly rubber. Nobody's done that. Oh, you've got to do this. So, kids today They don't have this experience. How are you going to learn how to experience your environment without these types of explorations? And the joy that comes with that. So it's really critical that families grow up with an acute sense of their environment. This is a project up in Lindenhurst, Bonner Farm. There's actually some stepping stones there underneath these 2-ton cut-out metal cows. And these are epoxy cow pies. City kids especially need to play out to discover. At the Pritzker Family Children's Zoo, we avoided putting fiberglass elephant heads in the children's zoo. Those things are cute for photographs, but useless in every other regard, unless you want to discover something about off-gassing. So the zoo is full of real stuff and real challenges and places to explore. There's no instructions, real animals, real stuff, and actually real animal poop. We're reluctant to present our children opportunities to be creative with art and music. The people who think this is the most foolish are mathematicians and scientists. This is often completely lost on our school administrators and policymakers, but fortunately not on places like Chicago Children's Museum. At Architecture is Fun, we make places that are invitational. You look at it and you know what you want to do. And what you want to do probably is different from what your friend wants to do. And this is okay. In fact, it's great. When a child makes art, it's no different from when an adult makes art. It has value. And here, art by adults and children hangs appropriately in a gallery setting. We think this is a sophisticated approach. And coincidentally, children are quite sophisticated. They've got strong opinions and they have very good taste. They enjoy art. It's often the adults in their life that don't know how to appreciate art and beauty anymore. Here's a great statistic. We make, as members of the human race, we make 90% of all of the drawings we're going to make in our lives before the age of 10. Imagine that as an architect. You're really lucky. Now, you're still making drawings, but at some point, that 11-year-old has been told, you're not very good at drawing, are you? And it closes the door on creativity to that child. This is not a good place to be. When your parents remember that. The My Museum project builds a community of artists, and it's a collegial, collaborative, communal, instinctive environment, endorsing creativity. Kids should be comfortable with creativity and invention, and this should be a crucial societal value, not just in a children's museum or an art gallery. This should be in schools. It should be at home, and it should be part of who you are. Here's a picture of a house. I actually colored this in myself. This was a Ronald McDonald house that we designed in Oak Lawn. If you don't know, Ronald McDonald houses are places where families with really sick kids come to stay while their child is in hospital. It's really important that it looks like home. This elevation faces the children's oncology ward, so a child can see its parents staying in a house that actually looks like their image of home. In the front yard there's a tree house, and it's a real tree house that you can go in and actually be in the tree canopy in front of the house, and it's a place of reflection. It's also a sign. It's an icon of home and childhood, and that we got the client to buy into this is a really good indication that they understand that, especially in times of stress and anxiety, play and fun are really important, and seeing things from a child's eye. On a really limited budget, it would have been an easy out to place something generic and motel-like on this site. Certainly the hospital across the street makes no effort or gesture at notions of comfort or healing through its architecture. All the more important then that our client take the leap and set a precedent. As architects, this is our fundamental responsibility. So for me, the best way to do this is to ask kids what they want and listen and interpret their dreams, and then give them something that looks as though it belongs to them and to their communities, and to do it with a sense of humor and to do it in color. I started with these grubby, empowered kids, and I translated them into color with fun and creativity. It's the side of Mises' head. It's got a very flat back of his head. You never see that in the pictures. So grubby children were really essential to Lady Allen of Hurtwood, who started the Adventure Playground movement after the Second World War. Her crusade came to America in the 1950s, and the last time as designers was during the 50s, when we believed that risk and creativity were a good thing. So one of our ongoing clients, we keep doing small projects for them, is St. Chrysostom's Day School up on Dearborn Street. They're a private preschool. And much of our work with them is a reaction to the grey and very uncolourful environments that we send our children to every day. This is a 450 square foot outdoor Gothic garden that we designed for the school about 5 years ago. It's won a bag full of awards. The space is never wider than 15 feet, usually less, but it's populated with a theatre, opportunities for art making, storytelling, gardening, and the general year-round mischief making that young children like to get up to. And it's part of a long-term plan to elevate some spaces formerly used for more ecclesiastical purposes into a magnificent introduction to a lifetime love of play and learning. This is indoors. It's the Treehouse Chapel on the second floor of the complex. The complex includes a school, a rectory, and a church. This is a modest 650 square feet that's a preschool during the week, sometimes community space at night, and a Sunday school on weekends. So it can't always be childish. It needs to be multifunctional. It clearly does have character. Most of the project is off-the-shelf, prefabricated system furniture. It's intended for use in schools. But there are obviously some custom interventions and our adult moments of mischief that breathe life into what is essentially a lot of cabinetry that holds a lot of stuff that keeps an early childhood education, or makes an early childhood education joyful, diverse, and magnificent. There are some great places to hide, change level, explore, and colour the world around you. There's some reference to the church with these quatrefoil motifs, and you probably saw those in the playground earlier. There's a nice continuity of aesthetic, quality, execution of details that's not the norm in most early childhood and elementary experiences. I'd say it was probably rich and inspiring. The trees are a focal point of the space, and they create a proscenium for play, performance. They're another great icon of childhood, reminding parents of building blocks and the potential to grow. And they introduce complexity, sophistication, and beauty. You can hang mobiles from them, add a curtain for theatre performance, or hang messy paintings and paper plate collages to dry on them. For me, this is the money shot, the first impression that a school makes to children and parents who are thinking about enrolling in the school. It talks about the importance of education and the value this school places on the environment that inspires, and that it inspires learning and community. School should be an adventure for invention and imagination, just like that first playground I showed you. This is the next project, exchanging the rickety climbing structure in the gym downstairs into an arc of activity. And hopefully this is something, if you ever invite me back, I'll show you next time. Here's the Latin School of Chicago. This is their new science department public space. They call the Interactive Science Forum. I talked a little bit earlier about empirical data. This is a $10 million project. This 4,000 square foot space ordinarily has $800,000 spent on it to achieve the standards that the Latin School expects. You can do something fairly generic with that, and they often do. We recommended to them adding 1% to this project for art, and we adjusted the design philosophy and their building standards. By introducing art into a staircase, for instance, there's a kinetic sculptural wave that hangs in the ceiling there, and wrapping it with Doug Fogelson, the Chicago photographer's photograph of waves on Ventura Beach. Arriving here indicates to these high school students that something different is happening in the science department. The student common room is a CSI-like brainstorming space, visible to all, especially faculty who like to see that time has been used constructively and not recreationally in this private student space. The room is calibrated and immersed with curriculum. The ceiling fixture is a diagram of fusion. The 1 meter floor grid allows the physics teacher to mark out floor calibrations for his projects. And the movable risers are curiosity cabinets filled with natural history specimens that the biology teacher used to spend $2,000 to rent every year. Everything moves, and this has become a social hub for the school, a recruitment tool for administration, and for less than $100,000, an extra classroom for about 5% of the cost of what a regular science classroom costs. This is really valuing in for the client and validating what we do. And look at this. This is actually the science department. Not everybody loves science. So even the athletes, musicians, writers, artists, naturalists, everybody wants to hang out on the science floor. This is a really magnificent revelation to the school. Outside the physics lab is this bench that's an accurate a model of a DNA strand of one of the teachers. And behind that, there's a writable surface of H2O molecules in solid, liquid, and vapor states. The conversation here is about science and art, and for these students, being in a place that they see as being cool. This project immediately makes a profit for its client in this way. For those of you that have never seen the back or inside a niece's head, this is what it's like in there. There are arches in there. That's so cool. So I think this is the last project I'm going to show you. This is a project in Davie, Florida. So when you're all on spring break in a couple of weeks, go and do this during the day. It's nice. This is Young at Art. This is the place that we got to create and program and develop with a client. It's what the art museum won't do. The art museum won't let you touch and interact with stuff very much, not while they're looking anyway. And it's what the children's museum, school, or local community can't do, to invest in art and make it accessible to you. Here we were bringing provocative, imaginative, and creative experiences into daily life, and doing it through art. You've all, when you go to Chinatown and you end your meal with a fortune cookie, you always crack the fortune cookie open and read it, and you can add in bed to every fortune. Who's played this? Yes. Your lucky number is 27 in bed. You will meet the tall, dark, handsome stranger in bed. So, at Young at Art, we took this strategy, and instead of in bed, everything that you want to do at Young at Art, everything that we had to design, everything that the educators wanted to execute and provide a programming for in the museum had to be done through art. If we couldn't frame that in our program, then we had to adjust our program. So here's the first thing that you see in this experience. It's a cave. It's a modern Floridian looking cave, but the cave is a really sort of important image in the history of art. This is where the first marks were made. And our responsibility is to engage the visitors to this through art and through architecture. So the cave is an interactive multimedia experience. It's got all of these tactile opportunities. And it leads into an environment where there are installations and interactions that engage you in a conversation about art, through art, with architecture. This is a portrait gallery. And a sort of exploratory world that allows you to build New York with with these wooden toys, or to ride on a subway car, or to explore a beautiful environment that is made entirely out of recycled, repurposed materials. This is done with a Cuban artist, Pablo Cano, who builds marionettes out of things that he finds in the trash, or the things that people leave in his neighborhood. They put things in his mailbox, so things that they have no use for. And he turns them into magnificent puppets. At the back of this gallery, we created a theatre, and this is a classroom for visitors to this museum to generate their own marionettes and puppets out of recycled materials. And it also becomes a really wonderful performative space. This is a classroom, but it doesn't look like a classroom. It becomes invitational. And this removes the barrier that your parent put up when you were 11 and said, you're not very good at art, are you? This opens that door back up. And it's too enticing for you to resist, even adults like this. This wall is actually a map of the world. It's a somewhat pixelated one. It's marginally better drawn than my iPhone pictures. And on the back side of it, it reveals the world around it, and it's a collection of objects from around the world. I showed you earlier the picture of the little girl inside somebody's head. I talked to you about the numbskulls. We worked with another Cuban artist, Florida-born artist Lionel Matthau, who's actually the son of the jazz musician Arturo Sandoval. And Lionel likes to draw the inside of his head. This is his sort of conceptual derivation for a lot of his work. We got to make the inside of his head. And this is the interactive but very shagadelic space that was invented by Haitian artist Edward de Valcaré. And this is a place where visitors explore industry, mold making and stenciling. And this new paradigm of sort of museum making art is really accessible and relevant. This is a really great field trip. All field trips to all museums were like this. The highlight of the journey of the field trip is Hokusai's Wave. An origami fishing boat sails through this with Fuji Salmon and the horizon in the background. Instead of being a beautiful little woodblock print that you buy in a market in Kyoto, this is a 25-foot tall interactive space and place that probably for many people might be the first introduction to this iconic piece of art. These are the types of journeys that we owe ourselves in everyday life, and what the Young at Art Museum permits through art, and what we got to engage everybody in through architecture and design. So it allows us all, especially those children at the top of the wave, they're 25 feet above their parents, to see the world from new perspectives. This is what endorses invention, creativity, and allows them to say, what if, why not, and how yet. So, this is where I started, 99 slides ago. This was a magical place. You all have that sort of equivalent memory somewhere stored up in your data bank here. Take the responsibility and memory that's still in there to generate great spaces as you head on your trajectory through architecture. This is what the power of play is all about. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So when collaborating with artists, what are the parameters that you set for that sort of condition? Do you give them the floor walls, the floor and the ceiling, and just tell them to go and like create what they want, or do they work with some additions that you've added architecturally and work around those?
I didn't talk too much about our process, but virtually every architecture is fun project has an artist in it somewhere, and very often multiple artists. I think that the easy answer to your question is we just have them on the project as soon as possible. And so as the space is evolving, as a team, we get to pick where will be the biggest value from an artistic intervention that is not something that we personally create. So they sort of lay claim to something, and it's probably really blurry how that decision is made. It just happens in a sort of natural way, so that the art is embedded in the project. It's not something that, let's do a mural here at the end. And by doing it that way, you get the client or the benefactor to buy into it. They understand the value and the contribution that it makes to the space, that it's integral, it's not additive. Anyone else? You guys are the best. That was so complete. I answered everything in advance. Okay. I really appreciate the invitation. I really applaud AIS here at IIT. You guys do an amazing job. I love how involved you are in the creative community here. Keep it up. And I'll see you in the halls of AIA, or I'll look for your resumes dropping through my mailbox, through my email mailbox. Do not send me 500 megabyte portfolios. Do not call me dear sir or madam. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.